أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي ويكافئ مزيدا نويت تعلم تعليم وتذكر تذكير ونفع وانتفاع الفاتق للاستفادة الحث على التمسك بكتاب الله تعالى وسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعاء الهدى ودلالة الخير وابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. All praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, our sustainer, the one who's constantly giving us his divine blessings, the one who is independent of the need of his entire creation, and his entire creation is dependent upon him, the one who sent for us a guide and a messenger, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Peace and blessings be upon him, upon his brethren from the prophets and messengers, upon his noble family and noble companions, and upon all those that follow his righteous footsteps with excellence until the day of resurrection. Ameen, ameen, ameen. Inshallah, we intend to learn. We intend to teach ourselves and teach others, to remind ourselves, to remind others, to hold fast to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and doing so, calling people to guidance, guiding people to do good, in order to gain the noble countenance and pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just to recap on the intentions of learning, and we are learning a very important subject of fiqh, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for, he will give them an understanding in the religion. So alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he has allowed each and every one of us here within this gathering, that albeit it's a virtual gathering, but we're on this journey to learning about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a sign that Allah wants good for us, because if Allah didn't want good for us, he wouldn't have allowed us to be in this journey. He wouldn't have allowed us to learn about his religion. So this is a glad tiding for each and every one of us. And, inshallah, a reminder of the greatness of this. And we talked about previously about the importance of seeking sacred knowledge. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the secret of sacred knowledge, the fish in the angels spread out their wings underneath the feet of the seeker of sacred knowledge, and the fish in the water seek forgiveness and ask for mercy for the person who is seeking sacred knowledge. It's such a great thing to learn this sacred knowledge. And it's not normal knowledge, it's sacred knowledge, because it leads us to the sacred. Other knowledges may not lead us to the sacred, but this knowledge and other branches of learning of the deen that lead us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these become the sacred sciences. And therefore worship. So worship is in many different forms. Worship in prayer is one. Worship in learning is another. So, ultimately what we're doing here is we're learning how to worship correctly. And therefore, all of our subsequent actions that we do that stem from this learning, is going to have an effect upon us. So it's one thing is learning, and then the other thing is implementing that learning. And that's something that we have here within this learning of fiqh, and this is why it's so important, is that we learn how to ensure that what we're doing is valid, ensure that what we're doing is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something we just make up as we go along. It's something which has a basis, and inshallah, this will help us in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, we continue off from where we last left off last week. Share my screen, inshallah. So we talked previously about menstruation, haid, and now we will go on to the legally excused category. So who is the ma'dhur, the legally excused one? the legally excused is a person is considered legally excused when a problem that normally nullifies ablution is present for a complete prayer period, such that there is insufficient time for the individual to make ablution and pray. Okay, so what we're talking about here is we're talking about somebody has an excuse that would normally, what normally invalidates their wudu is something which they cannot control, and therefore they've got this difficulty upon them. So, for example, if somebody has an issue with their letting go, their wind, they're not in control of it, and every time they can't do wudu and do their prayer without letting go. I mean that this is an issue that they can't. It's extremely difficult upon them. Or someone has incontinent. They need to go to the toilet. So there's lots of different cases for the person who's ma'dud, but in essence, it's somebody who cannot control themselves, and therefore this person is excused. Okay. At the time of the prayer time, the person performs ablution and prays, but as the passing of the prayer time nullifies that ablution, a fresh ablution must be performed for each prayer period. So what we're saying here is that, let's take the case of somebody who cannot control their wind. Now, you have to let that whole prayer period pass from one prayer to the next for you to be able to see that this is an excuse that I now have, meaning it's uncontrollable. What you then do is you wait to the next prayer period and you wait towards the end of that prayer period. You do your wudu, you pray, and that's fine. Even if the excuse manifests itself in that time of you doing your wudu and praying. And then what you need to do is you need to do the same for the next prayer period. So you have to do wudu, fresh wudu, at each prayer period. So that's a case for someone who is ma'dur, who's classified as being excused in the legal from a legal sense. And subhanallah, it shows us the mercy of the religion and the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places upon us, that that in the situation that we're in, there is always a way to return back to worship and understanding that. And this is why it's important, because some people might think, actually, I can't pray at all. No, we're not excused from not praying. We're excused from the conditions which stop us from praying. But the prayer still has to continue, unless there is a reason for why we can't pray. And for the cases which we've covered before, which is the haid, is a reason for why women couldn't pray. But other than that, there should be the prayer is important and therefore it has to be done. But then there's conditions that, and a point of excuse that one has for the condition that they have. So moving on to impurities, and we're going to cover this in detail. So the word impurity, linguistically najasa, derives from the word meaning to be unclean and impure. Najas is unclean. And we'll go into the categories here. So legal impurity manifests itself through minor and major ritual impurity. Okay, minor, and we'll cover the details here about what we consider as minor and what we consider as major. It is an attribute described by sacred law that removes purity and affects some limbs of the body or the body in its entirety. Okay. So intrinsic impurity, there's two categories. One is najasatul haqiqi. Okay. So najasatul haqiqi is the intrinsic impurity. In this intrinsic impurity, there's two categories. One is najasat al-ghalidha, which is severely impure, and one is najasat al-khafifa, which is slightly impure. So you've got severe and slight in the category of intrinsic impurity. Okay, we're going to go break these categories down now. So Severe intrinsic impurity, najasat al-ghalidha, we're now referring to. This refers to an impurity mentioned as such with an unequivocal scriptural text. Okay, so unequivocal scriptural text, either the Quran and some of the Hadith. So there's no kind of questions about them, and these include alcohol. So alcohol is from the severely intrinsic impure substances. Vomit exceeding a mouthful. Okay, exceeding a mouthful, not less than a mouthful. Less than a mouthful is fine. It's exceeding a mouthful. Flesh and skin of carrion. Okay, and these are dead animals. Saliva of predatory animals. The difference between predatory and non-predatory. So the saliva of predatory animals is considered a severely intrinsic impurity. An excrement of chicken, ducks, and swans. So these are all cases of severe intrinsic impurity. Flowing blood, however, considered pure is the blood that remains within the meat, liver, vein, spleen, heart, and blood of insects, and the blood of fish. Okay, so this is really what we're talking about, is the blood from the human beings. Urine and feces of animals unlawful to eat, such as humans, dogs, pigs, and predatory birds. Okay, so all of these cases are severely intrinsically impure. And then all liquids that invalidate wudu if they flow, such as semen and pus. So all from the category of severely intrinsically impure. Then you've got slightly intrinsic impurity, which is najasat al-khafifa, and this refers to any impurity that some evidence is considered impure. So they're not by an equivocal text, but some evidences class these as being impure. So therefore, we from the perspective of the Hanafi madhab, we have these as being from the slight impure category, and this includes urine of animals lawful to eat. Okay, so for example, urine of a chicken, because the chicken is lawful to eat. Horse urine, excrement of cattle, camel urine, droppings of bird unlawful to eat, such as an eagle or vulture. Okay, so these are from the impure category. So what are the rulings here? So the person intending to pray must remove impurity from the body, garment, and place of prostration. So once physically on you, that's on your body. Secondly is on your clothing, the garments of what you wear. And thirdly, where you're prostrating. So these three combined must be free from impurity. If there's a barrier between the person and the filth, then this is fine. So an example would be that there would be filth on the ground and you put something onto that. Now that becomes a barrier. So you've got a cloth or something that you're placing onto the ground. Now there's impurity underneath, but that cloth acts as a barrier. So therefore, you're not prostrating on that filth, because the place of filth, the place of prostration is free from that. There's a barrier between that impurity and where you're prostrating. However, if severe impurity is present and equal to or less than the size of a dirham, it's considered to be excusable. So this would be like a 2p coin, or we would say the kind of the inner part of your palm. So you've got your palm, the inner part. If you look like that, that would be the amount that would be excusable from a severely impure perspective. If it's non-severe impurity, this is now the light impurity, then an area up to the size of a quarter of the garment or body is overlooked. So there's different categories If it's severely impure, then there's less of an amount. And if it's less impure, then if it's severe impurity, then then the amount is excusable is smaller. But if it's less, then we've got a larger amount that's excusable. So it kind of makes sense. If we have a case where, we'll come on to this. If the impurity is more than the excusable amount, it is obligatory for it to be washed away. Prayer that is performed in a garment that exceeds the excusable amount is not considered valid and must be repeated. Okay, so if we have, alcohol on our clothes, this is severe impurity. Now, if it includes the amount of our hand, for example, then that's more than the excusable amount. So therefore, any prayer prayed with these clothes on would be invalid, and therefore those prayers had to be repeated. So if it's less, then obviously we have an excusable amount. If the impurity is less than the exempted amount, it is preferred for it to be washed away. Okay, well, why? Because it's better to be, cleaner. But the leeway here is really just a mercy for, not everyone is able to maintain in that state of cleaning. There may be people that are, farmers or working in such conditions that, they're really the ones that are benefiting from these excusable amounts. But generally speaking, if we can remove all of the impurity, it's better that we remove all of the impurity. But if we had that impurity on us, then as long as it's from the excusable amounts, then we're within the limit. If the prayer is performed with the excusable amount present, the prayer is considered slightly offensive. So the prayer would be considered makruh tanzihan, not makruh tahriman. So slightly offensive. Why? It's because we should have really removed the impurity, but the prayer doesn't need to be made again. The prayer is valid, and from that perspective, we don't need to repeat. So just to mention as well, if we have the excusable amount in parts, then basically the addition of those parts are what's considered. So for example, here, if we have specks of, let's say we were talking about alcohol as an example, we have specks of alcohol on our clothing. Okay, it's a bit on, on our trousers, it's a bit on, on our shirt. So if it's each part is considered a little amount, but if the parts combined together is represented as being less than the excusable amount, then that's fine. But if it's more than the excusable amount, together, collated together, then obviously it's not excused. So it's not about just one part, it's the entire garment that we're wearing, or the entire place of, or the entire part of our body. So that needs to be taken into account here. So it's not just about one part we're seeing, it's in relation to the whole garment or the whole body and the whole place of prayer. So methods of purifying. Impurities can be removed with water or any other cleansing liquid, such as vinegar, rose water, other liquids is fine for impurities to be removed. If the impurity is visible, so for example, blood or feces, all the traces of the impurity must be removed. However, if the impurity is non-visible, for example, urine, not all urine is visible. Some urine may be visible, other urine may not be visible. Because of the fact that we can't see it, we need to wash this area 3 times. Okay? 3 times is the amount that we need to wash this area. And even if we are to put the clothes into the washing machine and they've got impurities, it's better that we wash it before we put it into the washing machine. So, but if we don't, then it's still valid. But it's better that we wash the cloth 3 times before placing it into the washing machine. Any surface through which impurity cannot penetrate, such as glass or metal, is purified by wiping. Okay, so now the properties of that surface is that it hasn't absorbed the impurity. It's now on the surface of that impurity. And if we wipe that surface, the impurity has now been removed. So hence, if urine falls in a bathroom which is not carpeted, wiping is sufficient for purification and washing is not required. Okay, so this is important to consider, because sometimes we can be very excessive, and therefore, we're thinking that actually this is the way to do it. But when we look at things from the perspective of the law, it's fine if we want to, wash the bathroom floors or whatever. But the fact is that we should know by doing the wiping, it's removed the impurity. So therefore, we're not in a case of not being in conformity with the law. So we didn't need to kind of wash the floor. If we washed it, then that's fine. But we didn't need to go to that level. And it also, it should prevent us from being OCD about certain things. Although that may be a bit difficult in the current situation with COVID, because everything's about sanitization and washing, which is fine. If the ground has been touched by an impurity, then that dries and its trace disappears. The ground becomes pure but not purifying. So what do we mean by pure and not purifying? The ground is pure from the case of doing of praying, but it's not purifying. It cannot be used for tayammum, which we'll come on to afterwards, in terms of that being the ground being used for purifying. So it's pure and not, but not purifying. So for example, we have the sun. Through the sun, we have feces that turns into animal feed, used for fertilizer, for cooking and whatnot. This is now it's impurity that's dried, its traces disappeared, and now this becomes pure. So it's gone through a state of change. Any animal's part through which blood does not flow, such as bones and hooves, is considered pure after the death of the animal, except the pig, because the pig, by definition, is intrinsically impure. Tanning cures the skin of dead animals, except pig skin. Okay, so this is the process of tanning. It makes things pure, except for pig skin, which is intrinsically impure. So therefore, we have to be very careful about the shoes that we wear. That the shoes that we wear should not be pig skin, because pig skin is intrinsically impure. So we have to watch out what the leather of our shoes are made of. And something that we can tell whether it's pig skin is whether 3 dots appear next to each other. So 2 dots on the bottom and a dot on the top. So this is like a normal, this is how you can tell pig skin, because, it's impure. And praying with pig skin on, is problematic, because you've got impurity on you. And then, when it comes into contact with water, we should be careful not to have anything with pigskin on there, especially not our shoes or anything that we wear. So molecular change. So through molecular change, we can have something which goes from being halal to being haram, or vice versa. So we take the example of grapes. Grapes are halal. We eat grapes. Now, wine, which is taken from grapes, goes through this whole fermentation process. This now becomes haram because of its intoxication through the process change from being grapes. So now this is haram. Now the wine is then used to make vinegar, and vinegar is a different state, and it doesn't have those same properties, and this now becomes halal. So we can see from the molecular change of certain things, we have something which is halal and we have something which is haram. And it's about understanding this which is the importance of learning about the fiqh. So just to ask, is there any questions before we move on to the ritual bath? We'll continue, inshallah. So the ritual bath, linguistically, the word ghusl derives from ghasala, which is to wash, to launder, to cleanse, to purge. So this is basically washing. Minor ritual impurity. The one who is not in a state of ritual ablution is in a state of minor ritual impurity. Okay, one who is not in a state of ritual ablution is in the state of minor ritual impurity. Okay, which is different than being in a state of major ritual impurity. Okay, minor ritual impurity is lifted by wudu, whereas major ritual impurity is lifted by ghusl. So, for somebody in a state of minor ritual impurity, touching the Quran, praying, the prostration of recitation are all prohibited. Somebody in the state of major ritual impurity, one whom the ritual bath is compulsory upon, is in a state of greater ritual impurity. So this person, it's prohibited for them to pray, to touch the Quran, and to recite the Quran. Okay, so we see reciting the Quran is not in the section of somebody in the state of minor ritual impurity. You haven't got wudu, you can't touch the Quran, but you can recite the Quran. You can enter the mosque when you're in the state of minor ritual impurity, but you can't enter the mosque in the state of major ritual impurity. So somebody, a brother who's in the state of janaba, or a sister in the state of haid, can't enter the mosque. And we talked about the definition of what the mosque is in the previous week. In that state, circling the Kaaba, circumambulation of the Kaaba, you cannot do if you're in the state of major ritual impurity, which is different than being in the state of minor ritual impurity. So this obligatory ritual bath, this ghusl, the following render the ghusl obligatory. First is the emission of sperm to the exterior of the organ with a desire through other than sexual intercourse from a waking or sleeping of a man or a woman. Okay? This would make the ritual obligatory bath necessary. Disappearance of the male private part in the front. So the first one is not something that we're saying is permissible to do, by the way, but it would necessitate the ritual bath, because entering into the exterior is completely forbidden. But if it was to be done, then the ghusl would be required. Okay. Secondly is a disappearance of the male private part in the front or rear of the private parts. It would require ghusl. The presence of semen following sleep, unconsciously, or drunkenness, okay, would require an obligatory ritual bath. Cessation of menstrual or postnatal bleeding, and we covered this in the last lesson. This would necessitate the ritual bath to remove that person from the state that they were in before. The sunnah ritual bath, it is sunnah to perform a ritual bath for the following: the Friday prayer, okay, the 2 Eid prayers, entering into the state of ihram for going on Hajj, at the standing of the day of Arafat. These are all times when it would be sunnah to take the ritual bath. Recommended, so it's mustahab, it's recommended to take the ritual bath in the following cases: recovering from insanity or unconsciousness. Okay, somebody's gone into a coma, somebody's been knocked out, they've had a seizure, whatever it is, then they take the ritual bath. This is a recommended practice. Entering Mecca and Medina, entering the two holy sanctuaries. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to enter these holy sanctuaries. After having washed the body of the deceased, okay, so you are now doing the ghusl of the deceased. It's recommended for you to take a ritual bath. On becoming Muslim, okay, I've heard people say that it's fard. It's an obligation upon the person when they become Muslim to take a ritual bath. No, it's not. It's not fard upon them at all. It's recommended for them to, but it's not fard upon them. And this is the importance of learning the fiqh, is that we understand and we can place the prioritization on the right things. So the obligations are different from the sunnah, which are different from the recommended actions. Yeah, we should do them all. But if somebody is not doing a recommended action, we shouldn't be harsh upon people or stipulate to people that they must do something when it's a recommended action. Now this kind of drives people away from the deen. So we have to be very careful of that. On repenting from sin. So we've done a sin. We're making tawbah. We should do the ghusl. It's a recommended action to do the ghusl, to repent from sin. What are the obligatory components of doing ghusl? The first is the rinsing of the mouth. Okay, taking water into the mouth. Secondly is taking water into the nose. And when we're taking water into the nose here, is to take the water and sniff it so the water reaches the top palate. And then to blow the nose and put your index finger and thumb into your nose like this. That is rinsing the nose. Washing the whole body once. Okay, washing the whole body once. Every part of the body must be wet. There must not be a part of the body that remains dry. A pin drop of the body, skin, should not remain dry. Okay? If somebody has dreadlocks, or plaits, then the water must reach the root of the head. But it's not necessary that all of the hairs of the plaits of the dreadlocks are actually wet. Okay, so this is a case of taking the ghusl. So the method: begin with a basmala, begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and make the intention. Okay, but again, we don't make the basmala with our tongue in the bathroom. Washing the hands thrice to the wrist, and here the intention here is a sunnah. It's not an obligation to make the intention. So you see, the obligatory elements are only three. Okay, as long as we can do these three things, then we've got a valid ghusl. Okay, but this is now doing it in the method of the sunnah, which is to make it better, make it more closer to the way of the sunnah. To wash the hands thrice to the wrists. Wash the genitals even if there is no impurity on them. Okay, to still wash them. Remove any impurity on the body. Okay, remove anything that is impure on the body first, and then perform a complete standard ablution. Then wash the body thrice, beginning with the head, then the right side, right shoulder. So first the head, and then the right shoulder, then the left, then the right, then the left, like this. Dry ablution. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا سَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا فَامْسَحُوا بِوَجُوهِكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ مِنْهُ. If you cannot find any water, then do tayammum with pure earth and wipe your faces and your hands. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us another way. So if you don't have the water for wudu, or there's certain conditions or certain scenarios we're in, we can do the tayammum. So what are those? Distance from water for more than 1 mile or more. Okay, we don't have water for more than 1 mile or more. Okay, there's also another condition here that's not mentioned, but if water is inaccessible to you, okay, that's also a condition. So for example, if you have water next door, but you can't get to next door, or they're not, the room's locked, for example, then that water is not accessible to you. So therefore, you still fulfill the condition of being able to make tayammum in this case. Sickness. If we use water, it's going to make us more sick. Okay, this will cause. This is an excuse for being able to do tayammum, delaying recovery. So we're using water, and by water touching the skin is going to mean that we're going to be sick for longer. Then it's okay to do tayammum, and then trigger the sickness. Okay, something may be triggered by the use of water in that particular part, then or on our body. Then this would, we can make tayammum instead. And this is something where there was an occasion where the Prophet ﷺ, the companions were out in a place, I believe it was at a battle, and one of the companions entered into the state of janaba, so he needs to make ghusl. And what happened is the other companion said to him that you must make ghusl, but he was sick, but he was forced to make the ghusl. Now what happened? He made the ghusl and he ended up passing away. So that him doing ghusl, led to his death. Now the news reached the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ became very angry, and he said that you killed him, meaning what you did is the situation you placed him in resulted in death. So this is why we have this here. We have tayammum, out of mercy, that there are times and there are conditions in which case things are going to be more difficult. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that ease for people. And then, for example, if there's cold water, again, but by doing it in cold water, I believe that's what actually happened with this companion. He made ghusl with cold water. So this is something which if we don't have warm water, and by making ghusl in cold water, it's going to make us sick, then we should do tayammum to get out of the state of janaba or major ritual impurity. Fear of an enemy, human or animal. Okay, if we were to go towards water, and by going towards water, we might be in a place and it's out in the wild, and by the water is by going to the water, we're going to fear being attacked by an animal or attacked by people. Then it's permitted for us to do tayammum in that case. Needing for drinking water, so to drink or use for cooking for oneself, a partner, or an animal. So if we've only got a certain amount of water, and if we did ghusl without water or wudu without water, because tayammum is a substitute for wudu and it is a substitute for ghusl. If we had that water, and by using that water for ghusl, for wudu, or for using it for ghusl, we wouldn't have enough to drink for ourselves, for a partner, or our animal, then it would be permissible to do tayammum instead. And it makes sense because it's going through the prioritization. It's more important that we can have something to drink and to cook. So this is where there's mercy in the law. Also, if we're not able to extract the water, then that would also suffice. And also fear of missing the funeral prayer or Eid prayers. So if we're in a case and we go to a janazah and we don't have wudu, and we don't, we need to pray the janazah prayer, and we should make tayammum at that point, because we won't be able to catch the janazah prayer if we don't do the tayammum. So therefore we do the tayammum in this case, and also the Eid prayer as well, not the other prayers, because the other prayers we can make up ourselves. So substance for doing tayammum, anything that naturally exists on the surface of the earth, that not that grows out of the ground, but on the surface of the earth. So like, sand, or, anything that we find on the earth. It must not be something that can be burnt to form ashes. It must be not be malleable. If mud is the only option and is mostly soil, then one must use it. It is permissible to use a dusty surface if an imprint would remain when the hands are removed. Okay. So basically anything from the ground, we can make tayammum with. Obligatory components. One is the intention. We need to have the intention that we're doing the tayammum. Wiping the face once. Wiping both hands up to and including the elbows. Okay, that's the only conditions for the tayammum. It is considered slightly offensive to wipe more than once. Okay, because really it's a substitute, and we're only using it because we can't do, the wudu or the ghusl. What are the sunnah components? To begin with the basmalah, with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maintaining the Quranic order, having continuity, striking the ground with the palms. Okay, you strike the ground like this, spreading the fingers, okay, moving the hands forwards, then backwards after placing them on the earth. Then shaking or blowing the hands. So shaking or blowing the hands. So what's the method? Here's mentioned Abu Yusuf, who's a student of Imam Abu Hanifa, once asked his teacher Imam Abu Hanifa about dry ablution. Imam Abu Hanifa said dry ablution is 2 strikes. 1 strike is for the face, and 1 strike is for the hands to the elbows. Imam Abu Yusuf then asked, how is it? Imam Abu Hanifa bent down to the earth and moved his hands forwards and backwards. He lifted them up, shook them, wiped his face with them. He then returned his hands to the ground a second time and moved his hands forwards and backwards. He then lifted them up, shook them, and wiped with each hand the other arms to the elbows. So what he did here is he struck once for the face, and then he struck the second time for the arms and the elbows. Okay, and that comes to the end of the presentation. Is there any questions?
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. I've got one question, please.
Yeah.
The question is, I thought wine vinegar was a grey area. Can you explain, like, for example, you can have wine vinegar, which you said it does change the state, but then, for example, what's the difference? For example, you're cooking pasta and people put in wine and it gets burnt and then changes, but you can't have wine in your food.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, 1 second. That just seems to have lost. Are you with me? Yeah. So the wine vinegar is different from wine because it's gone through a process change from being wine to now becoming vinegar, and it is that there is a difference here. Some actually say one should avoid wine vinegar, but majority of the scholars actually from the Hanafi madhab actually say wine vinegar is fine because there's been a complete process change. Now, wine itself, that's not wine vinegar. I don't know the science behind the difference between vinegar and the difference between wine in terms of how that process change happens, but it is a different substance completely because of the change of process. When we have wine in food, yes, there is food that's being cooked and the wine disappears. But when I asked my teachers this question, they said, look, when you have something and you have the remains of impurity left in there, why would you want to eat that? Because really what it is, it's still wine. Now, probably it has been burnt off, but there still may be remnants of wine in there, which is different than vinegar because that's gone through, you know, a different state change. You know, maybe this is something that, you know, I could give you as a kind of task. Maybe you could just find out the different the process of making vinegar and how that is. I don't know. You know, are you aware of that?
No, I wasn't aware of it. That's why I've stayed away from, you know, wine vinegar, because I thought, you know, it still had wine in there initially. And I was just trying to, you know, we had a debate of this, that, you know, if people, what's the difference if you're cooking, for example, pasta and you're burning off the wine, why can you not then have that? And I think that's why I didn't have it. So
No,
that was why.
Professor some specifically talked about vinegar, and he actually said the house which has vinegar in there is a house which will have blessings. And he would have, like the shemail, he would have vinegar, and he would dip his bread into vinegar. Now, you know, vinegar is you know, is completely lawful. Wine vinegar is not the same as wine. Now, wine being burnt out, it's still wine, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Into vinegar, it's still wine. Um, you know, I'd maybe I'd just take this away to have a look at in more detail, and maybe I can kind of comment in the next class. But that's my understanding.
Okay, so yeah, because I just thought, because it's got wine, the process had wine in there. I thought
No,
initially, because it's, even though it's gone to the vinegar, it still initially had the wine. So this is why I've stayed away from it.
no, it's permissible to have.
Okay, thank you.
سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته